The return of a leader is never just about the man himself. It is about the movement he carries, the mission he embodies, and the moment in history that demands his presence. There are times when the course of a nation, of a people, is shaken, not by the winds of fate, but by the choices they make, by the voices they heed, by the courage they summon. History turns on the axis of conviction, and in such moments, the return of a leader is not merely an event, it is a reckoning. It is a breaking of silence, the defiance of decay, the resurgence of truth in a time of deception. The question is never whether change is coming. Change is inevitable. The question is, who will stand? Who will rise? Who will have the courage to be part of it? There is a deep and ancient law that governs the fate of nations. A people who forget their foundation, who turn from their principles, who abandon their faith, their strength, their identity, those people will find themselves adrift, tossed by the waves of chaos, deceived by the illusions of security, weakened by their own complacency. The fall of great civilizations has never come from a single blow, but from the slow erosion of courage, the quiet surrender to fear, the gradual acceptance of lies. And yet, throughout history, there have always been moments of return, of restoration, of men and women who refuse to bow. It is written that when the righteous are silent, the wicked prosper. But what happens when those who love truth begin to speak again? What happens when those who have been cast down rise once more? There is something primal, something undeniable about the return of strength after a time of weakness, of light after a season of darkness. It shakes the very fabric of reality like the sound of a trumpet in the night, calling sleepers to awaken, calling warriors to take their place. And in that moment, the weak tremble, the deceivers falter, the comfortable are disturbed, because truth, when it returns, does not return gently. It comes with a fire, with a force, with a reckoning. A leader's return is not about reclaiming a throne, it is about reigniting a purpose. It is about restoring what was lost, about tearing down the strongholds of deception, about breaking the chains that were placed on a people who had forgotten their own strength. And this is why a return is never welcomed by those who profit from corruption, those who build their power on the silence of the righteous, on the apathy of the people, on the fear of those who should stand. These are the ones who tremble when a leader returns, because they know that his return is not just his own. It is the return of a spirit, of a conviction, of a battle cry that had been silenced but never destroyed. There is something deeply human about the desire for restoration. It is written on the soul of every man and woman who has ever suffered loss, who has ever been betrayed, who has ever watched something precious be taken from them. There is an instinct to rise, to fight, to take back what was stolen. And that instinct, when it is awakened, is unstoppable. It is the force that has rebuilt cities from ashes, that has turned defeat into victory, that has transformed despair into triumph. And so when a leader returns, it is not just about him, it is about all who see in him the reflection of their own struggle, their own battle, their own hope that what was lost can be restored. The world is at war, not in the way we often think of war, but in a deeper way, a battle of the mind, of the soul, of truth against deception. And in such a war, words are weapons, silence is surrender, and courage is the deciding factor. The enemies of truth do not need to destroy those who stand for it. They need only convince them to be quiet, to be afraid, to believe that their voice does not matter. But when that silence is broken, when the oppressed refuse to comply, when the righteous refuse to be ashamed of their beliefs, when those who are cast out return with greater strength, then the entire course of history shifts. There is a price to be paid for truth. There always has been. Those who speak it are mocked, ridiculed, hated, attacked. They are cast as villains, painted as dangerous, treated as enemies of progress. But progress toward what? toward a world where right and wrong no longer exist, toward a culture where people are afraid to speak the simplest truths, toward a society that rewards cowardice and punishes conviction. That is not progress. That is decay masquerading as enlightenment. And those who have the eyes to see it must also have the courage to fight it. It has been said that for evil to triumph, all that is necessary is for good men to do nothing. But I tell you this, evil does not triumph forever. Lies do not stand unchallenged indefinitely. The foundation of deception is always weak, and it crumbles when the weight of truth presses against it. That is why there is fear in the face of return. That is why the establishment trembles when one who is cast down refuses to remain in exile. Because it is not only the man who returns, it is the spirit of resistance, the fire of truth, the voice that says, "We will not bow." This is the moment. This is the reckoning, not just for one leader, not just for one movement, but for all who have been waiting, watching, longing for the hour when they too could stand and reclaim what was taken. And the call is not just for one man. It is for you. It is for the weary, for the broken, for those who have been told that their time is over, that their voice no longer matters, that their beliefs are outdated. Do not believe the lie. Do not bow to the deception. Rise, speak, fight, because the return is not just about one, it is about all who will answer the call. And so I ask you, when history writes of this time, what will it say of you? Will it say that you stood in the face of fear, that you spoke when silence was demanded, that you refused to let truth be trampled? Or will it say that you remained quiet, that you let the moment pass, that you allowed deception to rule unchecked? Because the choice is not just for a leader who returns. It is for every soul who has been waiting for their moment. And the moment is now. There are moments in history when silence is no longer an option, when the tide has turned so far in the wrong direction that to stand still is to be swept away. There comes a time when those who have been watching, waiting, hoping that someone else will act, must come to the realization that no one is coming to save them, that the battle is already upon them, that the choice is no longer between comfort and struggle, but between struggle and defeat. And in such moments, a people must decide what they truly believe, whether they will surrender to fear, to manipulation, to the slow erosion of everything they hold dear, or whether they will stand, whether they will fight, whether they will awaken the lion that has been sleeping within them. A lion does not apologize for its roar. It does not ask permission to defend what is its own. It does not cower when faced with opposition. And yet, for far too long, the strong have been told to be weak. The bold have been told to be silent. And those who would stand have been conditioned to kneel, not because their enemies were stronger, but because deception is a powerful weapon. The lie that it is noble to shrink back, that it is virtuous to be weak, that it is compassionate to remain silent in the face of lies. These are the chains that have bound the righteous. And now the world stands at a precipice where those who should have spoken are ashamed to speak, where those who should have acted are afraid to move, where those who should have roared have been convinced to whisper. But something is happening. There is a stirring, an unease, an awareness that the road ahead leads only to destruction if things do not change. And with that awareness, something deep within the soul of man begins to shift. A restlessness, an urgency, an awakening. Because no matter how long a lion sleeps, it is still a lion. No matter how many times it is told it is nothing but a house cat, a moment will come when it remembers what it is. And when that happens, nothing can stand in its way. Strength has always been feared by those who seek control. They do not want a people who can think for themselves, who can stand for themselves, who can act on their own convictions. They want compliance, submission, obedience dressed up as civility. They will tell you that to fight is wrong, that to resist is hateful, that to question is dangerous, not because they believe it, but because they know that if you ever truly awaken, their power is lost. A society that remembers its strength cannot be manipulated. A people who understand their worth cannot be controlled. A lion that knows it is a lion will never again bow to the jackals who once convinced it to be silent. So the question is this: will you awaken? Will you shake off the fear, the doubt, the hesitation? Will you remember who you are? Because to be awake is not simply to be aware of the problem, it is to act. It is to step forward when stepping back would be easier. It is to speak when silence would be safer. It is to defend what is right even when the world tells you that you are wrong. To awaken the lion is to embrace the weight of responsibility, to understand that comfort is not the highest good, that security is not the highest calling, that a life lived in quiet submission is no life at all. There's a reason history remembers the bold. The great moments of human civilization were never shaped by those who waited for permission, by those who sought only to be liked, by those who valued comfort over conviction. They were shaped by the ones who risked everything, who refused to back down, who stood even when standing meant standing alone. It has always been this way, because truth is not upheld by the fearful. Justice is not secured by the complacent, and freedom is not maintained by those who refuse to fight for it. A great deception has taken hold, a lie so insidious that it has woven itself into the fabric of society, the lie that it is better to be weak than to be strong, that it is more virtuous to comply than to resist, that to stand for something is divisive and to fight for truth is unkind. But the reality is this: strength is not the enemy, it is the answer, it is the necessary foundation of every good thing that exists. Without strength, there is no justice. Without courage, there is no truth. Without conviction, there is no freedom. A world that punishes strength is a world that welcomes oppression, and that is the world that has been created. A world where fear masquerades as wisdom, where submission is disguised as kindness, where apathy is rebranded as tolerance, but the truth remains unchanged. The lion does not belong in a cage. The people do not belong in chains. And the time of sleeping is over. But make no mistake, awakening is costly. There is a price for standing, a price for speaking, a price for resisting the tide. You will be mocked, hated, rejected, labeled as dangerous, intolerant, extreme, because when you stand, you force others to confront their own cowardice. When you refuse to kneel, you expose those who have bowed without question. And there is nothing more threatening to a world built on lies than a man who will not be moved by them. But there is something even worse than the cost of standing, and that is the cost of remaining silent. The cost of looking back one day and realizing that when the moment came, you did nothing. That when the call was sounded, you turned away. That when the world needed lions, you chose to remain asleep. There is no safety in submission. There is no peace in silence. There is only the slow erosion of everything that matters until one day you wake up to find that it is too late, that the world you once knew is gone, that the rights you once took for granted have vanished, that the truth you once believed was unshakable has been rewritten. That is the price of refusing to awaken, and it is too high. So the choice is before you. Will you remain asleep, lulled by the false promise that if you do nothing, nothing bad will happen? Or will you rise? Will you awaken the lion within? Will you reclaim the strength that was never meant to be lost? Because the moment is now, the world is watching, and history will remember what you chose to do.